All right. Welcome, everyone, to the February 2023 edition of CSM Mastermind. I'm Andrew Marks, co-founder of Success Hacker and the Success Coaching Training Program. We're back for our monthly live webcast today, talking about the success plan discovery process. This free learning event is brought to you by Success Coaching, the global leader in customer success professional development training, now with over 22,000 students. Can you believe it? We got over 22,000 students on our skills development platform. Our training programs are available in a variety of formats, from self-paced online learning to virtual instructor-led boot camps. We are getting ready to release a significant refresh to our level 1 certification program in March. So if you've been holding off, now may be the time to jump in and check it out. I'm quite proud of all the work that we've done. We've worked very hard over the last 6 months to take it to where it is now. This also is your last chance to join our 12-week executive education coaching program offered in conjunction with the University of San Francisco. That launches actually tomorrow, with our first call starting next week. So I believe we're still accepting registrations through Friday, I believe. Also, the next session of data-driven decision-making led by the brilliant Ed Powers kicks off Friday, March 3rd. So sign up now and get $100 off. Ashley is going to drop a link to our program page in chat, along with some coupon codes for you if you're interested. You can find out more about our online learning and instructor-led programs and workshops at successcoaching.co. Now, this CSM Mastermind series is a live and unscripted discussion where we dig into a single topic relevant to customer success. Regardless of the company that you work for, the scope of your role, or the sizes of the customers that you deal with, we aim to pick topics that are going to be practical and useful to you. The schedule for our upcoming events can also be found at successcoaching.co. Click on the events tab at the top of the page to find out more. A few housekeeping items before we get started. This webinar is recorded, and we will be posting a replay along with a transcription on our website early next week. We will be taking questions later on during the webinar, so please don't be shy and use that Q&A button found at the bottom of your screen to either ask or upvote a question. We're also broadcasting on LinkedIn Live and have Tracy monitoring that feed. So if you have questions and you're watching on LinkedIn Live, please post them and they'll be relayed to us. Also, we love getting feedback during the event, but we ask that you keep all commentary to the chat window. So questions, Q&A, commentary to the chat window. Now, there's a lot of thought leadership out there, along with a lot of theories about how to deliver customer success. And in this series, we focus on the practical, real-world advice, best practices, techniques, and shared experiences from those that are practicing customer success on a daily basis. And to do that, we invite 3 panelists to join me for a roundtable discussion. These are people who are great at their craft, and we ask them to share their experiences and their perspectives. So without further ado, I'd like our panelists to introduce themselves to y'all, talk a bit about who they are and what they do, and let's get us started as usual in alphabetical order with Anna.
Hi, everyone. So excited to be here. Thanks so much for having me. My name is Anna Korzeniowska, Polish background, unpronounceable for most. I'm the head of customer experience at a company called Tech Nation currently, but years and years prior to that, I used to do jobs in project management, account management, business development, everything that I like to call CS in disguise. Eventually landed a job in CS with that label on, which was great. And I did the whole CS 360 at an early stage, company onboarding, help with implementation, cross-sell, upsell, renewal, retention, all the shenanigans around it, which I did pretty well. I got promoted to head the department and took over the strategy, processes, and international expansion there. And recently shifted gears, to look at customer experience as a whole at TechNation. And basically what I do, I try to digitize the services that we deliver to open it up to more customers and more users, still providing the same level of value. So that's me in a nutshell, and I'm joining you from London, UK.
Awesome. I love that, CS in disguise, but it very much is CS. I mean, everything that you named are all customer-facing roles that have an impact on customer success. You know, when we were doing a lot more recruiting, so we did a lot of recruiting and consulting when we were funding the development of our training program, I would regularly have consultations with job seekers that would say, yeah, I want to get into customer success, but I don't have customer success on my resume. And I would look at their resume and they had project management and consulting and training. I'm like, you do account management. I'm like, you do have customer success. Right? It's all about changing the narrative. It's all about creating a story about yourself and explaining that to people, right? Because what you do is customer success. And when I would work with prospects that we were thinking about taking on as clients, if they didn't grok that, we had a problem, right? So I'd pass and go to somebody else, or hopefully explain it to them so they change their tune. But Anna, welcome, and we appreciate you spending your dinner hours with us. So thanks for joining us. Next up, Madison.
Hi, everyone. My name is Madison Hall. I lead the Majors East team for a company called RingCentral. We do telecommunications software, voice over IP, and video conferencing platforms. I actually started in customer success 10 years ago, right out of college. I had absolutely no idea what customer success meant. I took a job because I needed money. So I took this job and ended up building out an entire knowledge base and owning 250 customers and their renewals. So I got a lot more than I bargained for, but along the way, I learned that I have a deep love of creating lasting relationships with customers and driving results and seeing customers through, you know, all of the changes of their business, their needs, and their issues. So I really found a love for this profession. In my current role, I started at RingCentral 4 years ago as a customer success manager, then was promoted to a senior customer success manager. And then about a year ago, I took over this leadership role. I say that I have like the 1990s Bulls of customer success teams. They're the greatest players in the game. I really mean that. They're incredible. They make my job very easy, but leading them has been such a wonderful experience. I learned so much from them daily. You know, challenging times, challenging market, but it is a joy to be able to lead in the customer success space and see the outcomes of the hard work with each and every customer. So very excited to be here. This is actually one of my favorite topics. So super excited to jump in and hope we all learn from each other.
Awesome. I love that. That's probably the most honest answer to, hey, why'd you get in customer success? I needed money. I needed money. But yes, I agree with you. Customer success is something that I really have always enjoyed in customer facing roles. And I'm not going to date myself and tell you how long I've been in this business, but before customer success was a thing, there's just a lot of satisfaction in helping a customer get value out of whatever it is you're selling. So I totally get that. It's a tremendous amount of satisfaction. So thank you for joining us, Madison. And last but not least, Max.
Hi, I'm Max Weisbrod. I run a customer success operations concierge called Baton that serves early stage firms. Before that, I ran strategy and ops for a fast growing Coastal-backed startup. And before that, I drove like 40% redundancies across a 700-person data analytics team at IPG Media Brands.
Awesome. Thanks, Max. So you're all about process and redundancy. Awesome. Process and redundancy of process and redundancy of process. Welcome, everybody. Thank you once again. We all appreciate your time today. Now let's get to the topic at hand. So are you looking to gain deeper insights into your customer base and understand their wants and needs better? Asking the right discovery questions is essential for building meaningful relationships with and understanding the needs of your customers. through asking the right questions, you can gain insights into customer preferences, desires, and value expectations. And this information can then be used to guide the customer down the correct path towards achievement of their desired outcomes. It's also important to ensure that discovery questions are asked in the right at the right time and in the right ways. Asking too many questions too quickly can come off more as an interrogation while leaving customers feeling unheard or not taken seriously. On the other hand, taking the time to ask relevant, impactful questions will show customers that you value what they have to say, the importance of what they're saying, and are there to provide valuable solutions that are catered to their specific needs. So to get us started, let's just lead off with what we're trying to accomplish in a discovery call.
I might
go for it. Go for it, Anna. It's all you.
I think, it's important to understand, like, that discovery conversations are not standalone. They're part of a longer journey that the customer is on. And there's probably a lot that happened prior to the moment where you sit with the customer trying to ask all those questions. So the first thing to do is to make sure that you validate what you already know. You should have access to a whole pile of information that the customer shared, maybe during the sales process or pre-sales process, maybe through the support function. Like, dig into it, check the CRM. What can you derive from the information that you have, and start the conversation replaying what you already know and asking to validate that. And that's, I feel, is one of the key things that you need to get to in that conversation: validation and understanding what are the key challenges and pain points and the end goal of the customer. Why are they here? Why are they paying for what you sold them? And very often, again, in my mind, the first discovery conversation that I would have is during the onboarding process, right? So I would want, they finish the sales process, we have the business case together, now that there's an introduction to the CS person that will take them on a journey. Well, I need to do a little bit more digging than the salesperson, because probably what you're going to end up a lot of times is the problem statement. The salesperson would get to the problem statement. This is it. They signed, it's sold. Here you go. Problem statement is not enough to do the work, the quality work. So the approach that I like to take is to sort of establish the starting point, validate, and get to the root cause of the problem. So if, for example, they said, well, we bought the solution because, we spend too much time doing something and we waste time, so we need to increase productivity, or our implementation process takes 3 months, we need to slash it in half. Ask why, and keep asking why until you feel like you've hit the wall where you reach to the root cause, and then assess the impact. So, try to quantify the pain, to be quite frank, right? Are you able to quantify it for them? And again, replaying what they're saying. And then as a result of that, you get to a point where you start sort of devising or collaborating on value delivery roadmap that is underpinned by change management principles, right? Because this is new to them. This is a massive project probably that they're investing in, and there's more than one person involved. So assess whether they have internally the capability to take it on, and where can you slot yourself into support. And last but not least important is ability to track what you sort of build together with the customer. Track that. How do you track it? And guess what? If you follow these, then you sort of end up with almost like a draft business case for when the renewal comes up, when the next EBR comes up. Because it's almost like you serving this to them on a silver platter, saying, hey, if actually this is what we've achieved throughout time. So that's my take on it. I don't know, what do you guys think?
So yes, and when I'm coming out of a discovery call, I want one, to make sure that we've got everything in place so that we know what needs to happen for their use case and to deliver value for them. The other parts of this are like, I want a foundation of trust, especially because I'm usually working with early stage. The product is generally immature and has gaps. So those are going to be places where you're going to, see issues. So building up that relationship, making sure that they know that they're heard, that they can count on you. That does a lot to make sure that the temperature is lower when things inevitably go wrong. Although maybe you've got everything buttoned up. Maybe you're better than me. And then third is like arming the champion with the information that they and resources that they need to be able to go to win for you inside of the account. For example, like a client selling like a compliance or delivering a compliance solution, usually after there's an incident. They need resources on like best practices and communication and all of that, so that it's a lot easier for them to go to their C-suite and compliance teams and say, hey, this is just how it's done. And that way there's no back and forth or, asked for like random weird feature requests to stuff like that. But yeah.
Awesome. I guess I'll say yes and. I always like this idea of like coming with an empathetic heart. We, are here to understand that they have taken a chance on changing, right? So they had something, unless this is a net new product that they're trying, and still that is such a leap of faith to take. So I love this thought process, like we're really in this discovery phase to understand the underlying question of why. Why did you choose to take this on, come over to our platform, and what are you hoping to gain by doing that? Now those questions seem so straightforward, but it takes, time and relationship building and asking those curious, empathetic, open-ended questions to get to the answers that you are then going to use for the remainder of your relationship with the customer, right? So we're going to come back around to those every single time we're speaking to them to remind them, hey, you came here for a reason. You decided to move from your on-prem system to a cloud system for security, for cost benefit. You're going to remind them of those reasons over and over again, but also you're going to allow them to come to that on their own. So they're getting to the place where they are the ones who are saying, we came here because we knew that we would save $1 million a year in, recurring maintenance fees. And you're like, awesome, we can do better than that. Yes, you're going to save that money, but we can also provide you with a lasting relationship, increased KPIs, your performance is going to go up, your satisfaction is going to go up. And so I think building off of what they have in mind is huge. Remember your audience, who you're asking these questions to. Their scope of possibility might be much smaller than if you ask their CIO or their CFO what they wanted to gain from coming to your product, right? So I always like to keep in mind that although the IT guy is really excited about coming over, think larger in terms of like, what are these decision makers looking for? And in your discovery process, ask the questions that they would ask. How are we going to be able to see that we've made an impact here? How are we going to know that your business is doing better than it was before when you took our product over, right? So I think that you have to kind of put yourself in those shoes. That's where that empathy comes in through and through. It's like, turn yourself around, really put yourself in their shoes and see like, we can do so much more than just give you a good product, right? And that's where the discovery questions and the discovery process comes in, because you're going to uncover all of those other hopes and dreams that they have, right, for moving to you and taking a chance on what you have to offer.
Yeah, and there's a so validating what we already know, super important, right? We're not, and that doesn't mean we're asking the same questions that were already asked in the sales process. That also assumes that sales has actually given us the information that we need, right? Which doesn't always happen either. But we validating what we already know, which puts us in a good place with the customer. Okay, this organization has passed the information from the people who made the promise to now the people who are responsible for making the delivery, right? So I'm feeling a little more confident. And just think about when that doesn't happen, how less confident your customer feels. So validation, not asking the same questions over and over again. And then, as you're going through this process, kind of peeling back things, asking 5 whys types of techniques, Help me understand more and more. Help me try to quantify that. So help me, let's validate what we know. Help me understand what we know we don't know. Right. So asking those 5 whys. And then you mentioned, Max, the building up a trust. Right. So you begin to build some trust up. And while it may not happen in the initial discovery phase, in that initial set of discovery questions, as you begin to build up that trust, as you begin to peel back the onion, and you begin to build a relationship with these people that you're dealing with, you can uncover some of the things you didn't know you didn't know. You know, those things that pop up, those black swans, as I've mentioned before, Never Split the Difference. I've mentioned that book multiple times, especially over the last 18 months. Great book by Chris Voss, where he talks about those opportunities where you learn things that you didn't even know you didn't know because you've opened up a channel of communication, because people feel like you're there to help them and they begin to trust you, so they overshare. But, one of the challenges that I think that a lot of people sometimes face is, are we conducting the discovery process with the right people? Do we have the right people in the room? How do you figure that out?
That's such a good question, and it's so critical in my view. I mean, I've tripped over my own feet so many times around this years ago. From my experience, you usually have, I don't know, correct me if I'm completely off here, but you would usually have like 3 types of stakeholders. You have the person who's paying for it, right? You have the people that are using it, and you have someone, maybe 1 or more people, who are championing and leading, right? And these groups of people very often have very different needs and challenges and ways of looking at this solution, sometimes approaches to change management. So the person who's paying is paying because there's a massive need and it's very important to them. The end users don't care, because they have their own ways of doing things, and your new shiny thing, they don't want it. They don't need it, right? And you have the champions who are sort of stuck in the middle. So when I would do discovery, I would cover all 3, because the likelihood of having to lift the end users along with the champion and the buyer is quite high. That would be my base assumption, that it's going to have to happen. I'm gonna have to help with lifting. So again, sets of questions. The questioning is different. The stakeholder type is different, and I suspect it's very similar regardless of what you're selling and who you're selling to.
I totally agree, Anna. So I think we've all possibly been in the position where you get to the time of a renewal and your stakeholders are happy, everything seems great, and then bam, the CTO or the CIO, they come in with requirements that you have never heard before. You have never been privy to these before, and it throws a wrench in your entire plan, right? We hear it all the time. In my line of work, we're always saying, align with the correct people, align with the correct people. And I think that it is so vitally important to understand and have a pulse, you're right, on these 3 personas, because the end user their experience is going to reflect to the CTO, the CIO, about how their end experience is with the product, right? If they're hearing complaints, if they're getting tons of tickets, if they're having issues, obviously that's going to, have a through line through everything. But I think we also must make sure that we are keeping the overall objectives, the objectives of the highest level should be our focus when we're in discovery, right? It's those questions that are going to make the difference between, do we keep this customer forever, or, at time of renewal, are they going to go and look for the next shiny new thing? So I think that's kind of a trickle down of those discovery questions should be at the forefront of our mind, and they should absolutely be kind of changing the way that we are interacting with the customer, but not to the detriment of the end user. So we should hope that those same initiatives are going to trickle down and make the end user's experience really great as well. So I think it's kind of one of those things where we're keeping in mind the higher level items, but then also making sure that we are at the same time simultaneously ensuring that everyone is having a good experience. I think we should always know that if we don't have that voice, right, if we don't have the highest level voice as part of that discussion, we are always going to be at risk, because they're the ones who, at the end of the day, it only takes one person to say they don't like the product or they're not using it to have everyone question if it's really a viable product or if it really needs to be used. I've seen that more times than ever, especially in a climate like today, where there's a lot of competition. People are trying to cut costs. There is a lot of different options out there. So I think that any time when we can ensure that their needs are being met and they know it because it's at the forefront, that's the best way that we can execute on those discovery conversations with all different levels of people. And it's as much as just asking. An IT person absolutely has, if they are, the mid-level and they're the ones who are going to be the admin of the account, right? We obviously want to make sure that they are understanding and that we are meeting their needs and asking those questions of what do they need from this product. But I think that they also are held accountable to that higher level, and their success is dependent upon that as well. So we will make them look amazing also if we're able to reach those goals. So everybody wins. It's just a matter of you really have to push to get those people at the table and to understand what their end goals are. And that takes a lot of questions, a lot of digging, and a lot of time.
And just to echo that, there are like layers of the discourse here. And, it's really important to watch for dissonance between what you're hearing in stakeholder meetings versus what you're seeing in product signals and everything else. A great case study on this is just look up any interview on Tegas, for example, with executives at Palantir. Palantir has an entirely CEO-led sales model. And they've got this interesting thing where they had this C-suite to C-suite connection, but the way that they were losing accounts in the early days was that they weren't doing enough to deliver value on the ground to the stakeholders, the end stakeholders, and then end clients would be complaining about the quality of the implementation. So they have to figure out a way to balance inside of these client-facing teams the needs of the C-suite, which is these high-level goals, while also these implementation details and small things, basically the tickets that Madison's talking about, where people are complaining those need to be kept under control, even if your core stakeholder, the champion, isn't directly responsible for handling those tickets.
Yeah, I think that like you said, we need to be looking at all these different levels who are involved. I like the way that you laid that out initially, Anna. You've got your keys. I look at all of these. I don't want to use just the term key stakeholder. I think they're all key stakeholders, right? You have that senior executive that is either sign the check, sign the contract, or sponsoring what's going on, and they've done that because they're trying to solve a problem that is likely tied to some sort of overarching business objective, right? And then what they've done is they've gone to their directs and said, hey, listen, we need to improve this thing, right? Because this thing that I'm asking you to focus on has a role in us achieving this overarching business objective. And then that middle management needs to go down to the end users and say, okay, I need you to do this thing better, right? And so you need to not only ask the right questions and serve the needs of all of those different constituents. I think through good discovery, what you also are able to expose is alignment or misalignment among all three of those constituents. So an example that I've used regularly in my teaching is this notion of a CFO has a directive by the board that says we need to borrow money at cheaper rates. So the CFO goes out and procures an accounting system that is meant to increase cash flow because banks look at if you have good cash flow, they are more likely to lend to you at a lower interest rate because you have cash coming in. And so you can make the payments and they don't look at you as much of a risk as somebody that doesn't have as good cash flow. So I want to move my DSO, my day sales outstanding, from 45 days to 30 days. It plays into our overarching corporate objective. So I go to as the CFO, I go to my controller and say, hey, we need to move our DSO from 45 days to 30 days. So I want you to implement this system to streamline cash flow, right? Well, so that controller understands that, but the individual end user, what's in it for me? Well, I'm going to allow you through this, as a collections representative, I'm going to streamline, I'm going to make things more efficient for you. I'm going to streamline your job. I'm going to allow you to leave here at 5 p.m. every day so that you can go watch your kids play soccer. And you're not stuck here trying to go and collect on our deadbeat customers, right? So we need to understand what each level of those stakeholders, what they care about, what's important to them. And it's through that discovery process and through asking those whys and peeling things back is where we begin to understand, not only are we talking to the right people, but is everybody in alignment?
It's so interesting, Andrew, because I just remembered a situation where I was involved with an enterprise customer in pre-sales conversations. I remember this big room, lots of senior stakeholders, and my company was there. And we were doing demos and presentations of all sorts, answering questions. And towards the end of the meeting, basically the consensus was, we love the product. It looks fantastic. But there's one problem. We've done this before with a different company, different product, and it was also really nice on paper. But where we failed was product adoption and actual usage. Like we didn't manage to adopt, we didn't manage to implement this change effectively. So tell us more around how you're going to support us. So this whole point about being, a change advocate and a change manager as a customer success person is really important. And discovery plays into that because that's the beginning of the process. How many times I've seen senior stakeholders looking for a technical solution to a cultural problem.
Yeah.
And you can see that. You can find that out very early on if you dig in and if you do a proper discovery, and that will give you a lot of actionable insight on how to handle that account, how to handle these teams, these users, and support them the best way you can.
Mm-hmm. And one thing that is also really critical is that these, when you're talking about this misalignment, it can be really helpful to send information about that back to the sales team. About what that misalignment between layers of stakeholders looks like. I've got a client in a healthcare context where the buyer, the decision maker is in the C-suite, but the champion really wants this software solution, but the CFO doesn't want it because it might make them look bad. Efficiency can be threatening to some people. When like the core value proposition is also kryptonite to another stakeholder, that could mean that that customer profile needs like a different approach, a different structure to the offering, or they could just not even be the right profile in the first place, in which case you're going to have some churn. So it's really valuable to get that information to the sales.
Well, yeah, and you also need to know that. I mean, that's you need to know that up front, right? Because if you're moving forward and you're getting that sense from one of the stakeholders, I mean, you've already done the deal. That's risk, right? That's not something that you should be ignoring, and that's not just something that should go back to the sales team. It's something that you in customer success need to be aware of and be prepared to arm the champion with the data points and the and the talk track that they should be taking to their management to counteract that person who's feeling threatened. Just a reminder, we're going to get into questions here in a few minutes. So if you have questions, add those to the Q&A. So we've talked about. We've talked about all these questions, the discovery questions, as part of success planning, right? So we need to validate what it is that the customer is trying to achieve. We need to understand the why behind it, uncover the things that we don't know that we know we don't know, potentially expose some of the things that we didn't know. How does discovery change when you move through the customer journey, though?
I can take this one.
Sure.
So I think that how I see it traditionally is that at the beginning, obviously, you brought a really great point up the other day, Andrew, which is that so many customers are really not interested in rehashing everything they have already given in terms of information, right? Like no one wants to sit back through being asked all of the questions that they have already been asked, right? So within my company, we use a process called selling through curiosity. It is a set of questions that open up the customer to explain why they would purchase the product, a lot of open-ended questions. So one thing we always encourage CSMs to do prior to being introduced to a customer during the implementation is they should have a really good grip on all of those reasons, right? You're walking in with that knowledge, armed with that understanding. And from that understanding, we should also know deeply about the business to which we are about to take on as a CSM. So I think that in the beginning, it's a lot of research. It's a lot of ensuring that you understand the motivations of the customer and that you're going to come in with an open mind and you're going to accept what you do not know and ask those questions to get to know those things, but also not make them backpedal through everything they have already gone through, especially because I would encourage everyone to make sure you know the average length of your sales cycle. Imagine if you've been going through a sales cycle for a year. Sometimes at my company, it's 18 months, right? Massive. That you do not want to go back through those questions, right? That you talked about for 18 months. So, at the beginning, it's a lot of this deeper understanding. Throughout the process of a customer, it is so vitally important, as I spoke about at the beginning, to do the full circle back around, right? We're gonna come back. We're gonna bring back up these questions because so much changes. We are in a time of change right now. We spoke about it earlier. Economics are different than they were during the pandemic. People are trimming back. They're changing the way that they're handling their business. We have to re-ask. We have to go back in, rediscover what is important to our customer base at this point in time. Someone actually shared in the chat that they're also seeing a lot of organizational changes, a lot of turnover, new partnerships, new leadership. I can't stress enough that discovery process when you get new leaders is vital. We don't know what we don't know, right? So this new person who came in, maybe they're a huge advocate for another product, right? Maybe they're very interested in bringing that other product in to usurp your position. So I think that it's incredibly important to have those conversations. And then the last thing I'll say is I love the practice of holding deep discovery and very pointed discovery pre-executive business reviews. So if you do EBRs or QBRs on a quarterly basis or twice a year, I think it's vital that you go through a discovery process to ensure that that conversation, whether in person or via video, I like to do them in person, but it's so important that you're coming in with the information they care about. No one wants to spend half a day in an EBR that they don't care about what you're presenting, right? No one. So it's very important that you're specializing it to their business needs, to what they're hoping to gain this year from the partnership. Where do they see growth? Where do they see what is lacking and what we could fill in for? So, think about it as this big, long journey we get to go on with the customer. And just with any relationship, there's seasons. You have to ask different questions. You have to open yourself up to different questions. And I would encourage everyone to create a list of these questions. The more that you look at them, the more that you're reminded by your leaders. I like to kind of pull out a couple customers and ask some pointed questions during one-on-one to see if the CSM kind of knows these items, has been asking these questions. It's very important to just practice that muscle memory of these are the questions that I should be open to hear. I should be open to gather the information from these questions, right? Maybe it's not voiced exactly as the question is written, but you're actively listening for the responses that they're giving you. Actively listen for their cues. I'll just say this one last thing. I was actually on an EBR today before this call. The customer was absolutely not receptive to what we were speaking about. There was a set presentation. The customer, I could tell immediately, he was very closed off. I stopped the conversation to ask him, hey, what did you hope to gain from this conversation? And he stated very clearly, he wished that there was more discovery before and that we had presented on a very specific thing he was looking for. if we had taken 20 minutes to have a pre-call with him or asked some of these questions beforehand, we could have saved everybody a good bit of time, right? Because we're going to have to go back and do this again with him and reestablish this relationship. So I just encourage you that even if you think you have it, ask the questions first. Make sure that we know that we're walking in the right direction before we start going down the path.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, even if you think you know, still ask, right?
Absolutely.
Because what you end up doing is you end up wasting their time, and you end up wasting your time, and you actually create a situation where you're likely going to make it harder for them to get on to get them onto the next business review, right? Those business reviews. People don't just wait around for vendors to say, "Hey, want to do a business review?"
Totally.
Right?
And you've scheduled for months. Yeah, and you've gotten the right stakeholders, and you have your leadership on the call. That's the other thing, is that like you're trying to look good also for your leadership. So go in with the best information. You want to be overly prepared for what means something to them. And I think that more than anything, and my leader spoke to me about it afterwards. It was someone who was on my team, and he spoke to me afterwards, and he said, did she know what he hoped to gain from this call? And I said, I unfortunately don't believe that she did. And that's it, right?
Yeah.
As the CSM, we should know what they were hoping to gain, and we missed the mark. So we go back, we do it again. But I hope I can spare some of y'all some of that by doing that pre-work and really making sure that you're understanding, what a customer is hoping to gain from this large, commitment of their time and resources.
Yeah, and I also liked your comment on just in general asking open-ended questions, and the question inventory. Actually, one of our more popular standalone workshops that we have been delivering lately is this discovery question inventory workshop, where we get a team together and work with them to actually develop an inventory of some of the most common discovery questions that they should be asking, based on what a customer's desired outcome likely will be. Those types of tools benefit your entire organization, benefit the entire customer success team. And once you have something established, you can then build upon that. Hey, you know what? This one worked a little better than this other one, or I added this twist to it. And, customer success is a team sport, right? So we should all be playing as a team to win. Max, Anna, anything else to add before we jump to some of these questions? All right. Let's take some questions.
Sorry,
Bax.
Sorry, I was muted. I was just saying the needs of accounts, especially small ones, tend to change over the life cycle of it. Yeah. And these repeated discovery calls are a great opportunity to see where they've shifted. And where you're able to help them more with your offering, or where adjustments needed. But otherwise,
Yep, for sure.
I do have a small.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Sorry, Andrew. I do have a small comment to make, something that worked for me in the past. And I think will be good practice to start maybe practicing discovery conversations. I used it as part of onboarding to do the initial discovery, which is quite in depth. And then a second use case would be whenever I would see an account that is at risk or with low usage, low activity, or some level of dissatisfaction, I would just go in and repeat. It was almost like I used to call it CS Clinic. We would revisit everything and plan from scratch. That came very handy. I think the way it came across was very positive. Okay, you're giving me all this time in the world. Obviously, I'm important to you, and we get to redefine and start all over again. So I think can be quite useful. Good practice. I would highly recommend.
Yeah, and actually to add on to that, and it may go without saying, but I got to throw it out there anyways. All of this information that you're collecting when you're doing discovery shouldn't just be something that you keep. Right? You need to share this back. Here's based on our conversation, this is what I understand. Right? So you can also reference back to that and say, hey, listen, we had this conversation and here were the things that you laid out. So if things have changed, that's fine. We can adjust, but I just want to make sure that we're on the same page. This is what we talked about. All right. Let's answer some questions. Kimberly asks, Kimberly, thank you for the question. Kimberly asks, how can and should discovery change at scale when you don't have as much opportunity to speak one-on-one with a large set of customers? And it looks like, Max, you wanted to jump in on this out of the gate. Max, what have you got for Kimberly?
So you're seeing this more and more. We're actually conducting a survey out in the field, and the top thing that we're hearing about is this scale function inside of these customer success teams. And we're talking to some teams where they literally have 800 accounts per customer success manager in that segment. And you can't have a one-on-one conversation with 800 people. It just wouldn't work, right? So one thing that might be worth looking at is there's this technology company called Superhuman that produces an email client. And they wrote a great piece on what they call an engine for product market fit. And what they do is they had like this one key question about how upset would you be if we disappeared? Would this be a problem? And what they were trying to do is maximize the number of people who said this would be devastating. I could not handle them not being there. So they would run that survey question and they would go to the people who answered in that segment, and they would look at the product signals for them, and they would talk to those people, the people where there's the greatest level of fit. And they would figure out what needs to happen in order, what do they want to see? Where do they want to see the product go? Because a large part of this at that scale function is going to be voice of the customer work to convey findings to the product team. And it's also going to be about educational resources, customer marketing, and working, figuring out the next thing you need to do in Pindo, as an in-app guide. So focus on the people who are crazy about you, not necessarily the bottom of the scale where they're a small customer who also doesn't really like you.
I also, Madison, Anna, do you have anything else to add? I mean, I personally also think when you're dealing with scale, you need to be more prescriptive. Almost like
I would definitely agree. Maybe more pointed questions, very specific to what we're trying to gain, right? The likelihood that we're going to be able to get a response from everyone is so slim, but even a percentage, if addressed appropriately through some type of campaign, even to get a small bit of data in terms of, what are we doing? What is your tech stack? How are you utilizing us? And then also, I think getting this information, I think Max touched on this, but getting this information from other sources. The likelihood that you're able to physically speak to them might be low, but we can see that adoption, usage, all of that information on a larger scale and make adjustments from there, right? So if the largest amount is not using one portion over another, or you can target for specific campaigns, that is all still discovery. Even though you're not speaking to a customer, that's all still discovery. So going through the process of learning more about these customers and how you can show up for them on a deeper level.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you, Madison. I think at scale, the most important thing is to figure out your own formula. And every company with different products will have their own formula. And what by formula, what I mean is, to what extent you look at the usage and what healthy usage looks like over what period of time. What's the type of user that, you're looking for them to do X, Y, and Z? Are they responsive? Are they clicking through the campaigns, the emails that you're sending? There's so many different factors, but over time you will see, first of all, when you look at your customer base, look at the section of it that looks really, really healthy and find a common denominator in terms of behavior. Okay, and that is your very good starting point. If you keep seeing that somewhere else, that means that somewhere else is healthy. And then again, on the opposite, look at the accounts that have churned in the past quarter or maybe 6 months. What's the common denominator there? So you can rely on data. You don't have to have in-depth conversations. However, I would say always make sure that you have a pool of users or customers, individuals that you can always touch base with. Always, because they represent a segment, they represent, a layer of user, it's always good to have that at hand. I like to call them early adopters because you can ask them for early feedback. You can allow them access to certain features, and you can ask them, how are things going, right? So that would be my suggestion. But yeah, data, access to data and having your own formula is key.
Awesome. Yeah. Prescription data. It's all important. Awesome. All right. Thank you for that question, Kimberly. Max, if you can hit the done button there. We've got an anonymous attendee who asks, what is the best way to handle this post-deployment after being with the customer for years? It's especially tough if you're taking over from someone who had no or poor notes. Okay, so you're taking over for. So the way I read this is you're taking over for somebody. You're taking over a customer for somebody, and you don't have a lot of detail. And it looks like, Madison, you wanted to jump in on some thoughts, some ideas around how to address this type of situation?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I first started at RingCentral, I was given a book of 57 customers in the mid-market segment, and the previous CSM had been abruptly, let go from the company. So it was it was one of those situations where there were no notes in sight, right? Customers who have been here for 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, they're kind of in the groove of being a customer, right? This is the ultimate opportunity. You can restart, re-kick off an amazing relationship with people who have been just in a stagnant, just a stagnant position, right? So they've just been going through the flow. This is a great opportunity to reintroduce new product sets, new updates, new releases, an awesome opportunity to get new stakeholders. Ask, is there someone at your company who's really passionate about your product? Does someone else want to kind of take this over and be the advocate for this and then take it from here? I think that really it is a lot like starting over from scratch. You're going to have to do those initial conversations. You're going to have to go in with the very simple questions. But again, just as we were speaking about before, it is vital that you go back through essentially the breadth of the understanding you have of the customer, right? So what's their usage? How do they use the product? What is their product set? What do they utilize in a daily basis within the product? Come armed with that information and then kind of go from there in terms of, getting with the right people. It will be daunting, but I hope that you, as the person who's taking over these accounts, would take much better notes and be a much better teammate in CSM moving forward. That is something we haven't brought up here, but I think it's super important to remember that we can't foresee the future and we're not always going to be with these customers. So be a good steward of the knowledge you have of the customer. Take amazing notes, make sure that you're doing wonderful handoffs and transitions. And just remember what it was like when you had to go through that process again, and be a good steward of making sure that the next person is going in with much more knowledge, right? That's the best that you can do, is to be better than the last person who was before you. So we want to have a good experience for the customer. Handoffs and transitions are never fun, but you can make it less miserable by just doing a good bit of work before.
Yeah, I love that, Madison. Yeah, I like this idea of look at it as an opportunity, right? And in all likelihood, if somebody left you with no notes or poor notes and you didn't have a transition, that means they exited pretty quickly. And I'd probably bet that they weren't doing their job or they weren't 100%. Doing it well. And so walking into that type of situation with a customer, if they're not doing a good job, they probably weren't doing a good job with that customer. So maybe they've set the bar really low, right? They've set the bar low and you have an opportunity to just knock it out of the park by just doing even a bit better than that. And hopefully you do a lot better than that. So I love that. But I love that suggestion of, take good notes, make transitions easy. We actually are just adding an exercise to our level 1 around creating customer dossiers. So when you do have a situation where you need to hand a customer off, whether you're leaving or whether your book of business is changing, you can be effective in transitioning information over, the most important information over to the new owner. So love that.
There's the other side of this is, if you're coming in, you're new to your job, you're probably worried about how you look to your manager. And it's really valuable to move fast on this, even if it hurts, and also manage the expectations of your manager, to, make sure that they're fully aware of what the situation looks like and what your game plan is. And, let them know that there is a chance that they might get roped in by an upset customer, and that you're going to do whatever you can to manage that situation as it arises.
Awesome. Anna, anything to add?
I think the only thing I would add, and again, I agree with both of you guys, but it's you can never predict what will happen if you don't have information, but something might happen. So try to be proactive about it.
Yep.
So if you're lacking information, this is risk. These are the gaps. Make sure you identify those gaps and see what you can do ahead of time, ahead of the EBR, ahead of the next meeting that you have with the customer or your own internal manager, right? So know the gaps and try to fill them out ahead of time before the situation arises.
Yeah, good call. Excellent. Madison, can you hit the done button? Just a reminder, we do go until 15 minutes past the hour. I already see some people having a drop at the top of the hour here, but we will keep answering as many of these questions as possible. And know that this recording, once again, will be put on the website likely early next week. So you can check it out if you check out the what you missed if you have to go. Our next question comes from Insight Timer. Assuming that's not your name, but maybe it is. So welcome, Insight. Does Anna have any recommendations for how to educate or prepare customers for the change management elements necessary to deliver on the value driving roadmap, i.e. success plan? Anna, what have you got?
Good question. Well, first of all, I wouldn't assume either way. So the first question I would ask, have you done this before? Right? Because the answer might be yes, and we're great at it. Okay, so we'll ask you for help if we need it, otherwise leave us alone. In most cases, probably, we've done it before but didn't work, we need some help. So there's a planning stage around change management where, first of all, you need to do, or they need to do with your support, initial assessment. So what are the existing change management processes that they might have in place, they might not even be aware of? Do they have an internal communications function? Do they have training and enablement function that they could utilize? What were the main challenges and obstacles in the past product implementations? Let's preempt that. What is the internal communication strategy, and how can they start planning what goes out internally to all the stakeholders and future users of your product? How should they be positioning that message? You can help with that. In fact, you're probably the best person to help with positioning. What's to help them decide on the timeframes, right? So we're looking at this rollout. We're going to start communicating tomorrow, and we want everyone to start using it by, end of the month. What needs to happen in between? How do we track the progress? How do we know that we're doing well or not, right? What does success look like in terms of rolling out a new solution? How do we know that people are picking it up? Do we have a feedback loop in place? between the champion or the leader of that change and all the end users? Is this something that you can help them implement? A very simple solution is have a shared document and regular meetings with everyone who's using the product to tell you what's working, what's not working. So then the CS person is not receiving multiple tickets. The champion is coming to you in regular meetings and telling you, okay, this is not working. Is this product related? Maybe we need extra training. And obviously have those champions identified ahead of time. That these are the key things that I would always look for and ask about before offering any help, really.
Awesome. Anybody else want to weigh in?
There's also like a risk mitigation angle here. When you're unfreezing an organization, they're typically based on use case or things that you've learned in the discovery process. For example, if you were like implementing a CRM for a firm or, something like that, and they were moving from spreadsheets or anything like that, there could be like a dark tail, of spreadsheets where key information stored that some stakeholders have that others don't. And then that doesn't get into the system of record and somebody is hollering, about like, how did you miss this, champion and success manager? So if in the discovery process, you find like key things about their use case, that you're able to, from your experience, you're able to say like, here are a couple of the common risk factors, during the implementation process. So that you're able to prep them against, if that sort of situation occurs during their implementation. So that they're able to communicate against that internally. It becomes critical for keeping the organization from refreezing before the change.
Yeah, I mentioned, I threw it in a chat too. We actually, change management is such an important piece of the puzzle when for customer success, for achieving customer outcomes. We built change management programs. We worked with a partner who was a change management expert to actually build change management programs. We've incorporated into some of our training, into some of our training programs. But to drive adoption is more than just feature function training, right? We're asking people to change the way they do business, the way they do something, and change is hard. Right. So, and kind of circling back to the topic of the conversation around discovery, this is where we are exposing, we're exposing what's going on now. And we know, and finding out where the customer wants to go. And then as the experts on helping the customer to get to where they want to go with what we have to offer, we need to be prepared to help them bridge that gap. That's why we're also huge fans of creating what we call a change management toolkit. And that is a set of tools that you, as a customer success manager, could be able to apply to any variety of customer situations that has things like the case for change and the what's in it for me and a communications plan and all the other things that, that Anna, Max, and Madison all mentioned, that are important aspects of driving change. So something to think about, actually, and that's also something that we're developing as part of our CS leadership track that's going to be coming out here sometime by mid-year. Actually building your own change management toolkit. So thank you for that question, Insight Timer, if that is your real name. If Anna, if you could hit the done button, please, we'll get to the next question. So Haley asks, Haley, thank you for the question. Hopefully you're still sticking around for the answer here. How are ways that you ensure handoffs are seamless between sales and CS at the beginning of the onboarding process? Are there certain areas you focus on when completing that internal transition? Is a risk/problems analysis provided to the CS team prior to having that initial intro call with a client? I don't think I've ever had a sales team give me that much information personally. It's usually like freaking pulling, you're just constantly trying to say, wait, there's more. Tell me more. you're holding something back. But Madison, looks like you wanted to jump in on this.
Yes, so this is definitely something that as an organization we have been working on for the last probably 18 months, is this idea that the entire customer journey is everyone's responsibility. So, traditionally sales has sold the deal and kind of washed their hands and walked away. We have an existing expansion team who continues to sell on existing accounts, so they have even less reason to continue to work with these accounts, right? So in the last couple of months, though, we have really been focusing on this. Everyone is responsible for a renewal. Everyone is responsible for a customer's health and their growth, and the way they show up as a customer. So I think that, we have all begged before. You said pulled teeth. Yeah, I've definitely been on the side of begging for any and all information that can be provided about a customer. I think a better way to go about this is to really partner with the salesperson. You have to be thick as thieves. We are in this together. We are not adversaries. I see people kind of mess up a great thing very often by intentionally kind of going to bat with the sales team. And I think that's just not the way to do it. We rely on them to bring us customers that we then support, right? For, years and years. They love these salespeople. Like I said, get to know your sales cycle, understand what the process is like. What does it entail? Because it will give you a lot more insight into who's showing up to these conversations, what questions are they being asked, how are they being treated during the sales cycle, and then utilize that relationship with the salesperson that they've already kind of, laid that foundation. Utilize that to build off of. You're going to still have to ask the questions. There's still going to be things you're not going to get, but you are going to understand more about the overall sentiment of the customer. We are really trying to get in there even pre-sale, right? Like we want to be there to talk about what it means to get a customer success manager. It's a huge selling point for anyone to get a CSM dedicated to their account. And we want to have that be like a reason you would go with RingCentral, right? Is because you get a CSM. So ask the questions, speak to your leadership, see, how you can be more involved in that sales process. And then I would also say the partnership with the salespeople, ensure that they know that this is a mutually beneficial relationship. We're going to help you. You're going to help us. Not to mention the fact that a CSM, through an organic relationship with the customer, can be responsible for massive upsell in the future, right? So if that means anything to your sales team, which I think it does, we are responsible to each other in this scenario. I have not always been a good practitioner of this. I have learned in the last 2 years that I had to change my attitude. I had to really show up for the sales team and be a partner with them. And I think that in learning that and learning to kind of humble myself to be able to take that information from them and also to capitalize on the relationships they already have, that can be sometimes difficult for us, right? We're humbling ourselves to say, I'm going to go ahead and they love you. They love you. You took them to that hockey game. They absolutely love you. Like, how can I capitalize on that feeling and move forward from there? I do think a part of this is, as we were speaking about the toolkit of having those questions that you ask, knowing what phases to ask these, and then also knowing when you should already know this information because they already related to the salesperson, that becomes very important here as well. And let the salesperson really kind of guide you in those first couple of weeks with the customer, because the hardest time for a customer is that part where they've signed a dotted line and they're going into onboarding. It is a super difficult time. We're asking so much of them. So this is the time when that relationship matters more than ever.
That's a great call out, Madison. I got to tell you, it's so easy to be annoyed with the sales team, right?
It is.
It really is. And I got to tell you, in my career that now spans nearly 3 decades, some of my most successful roles, both as an individual contributor as well as a leader, were roles where I established great relationships with my sales teams. And the thing that you need to do, especially somebody in an individual contributor role and in customer success, you have the power. You have this superpower because you do it every freaking day with your customers. Employ some empathy, understand the perspective of people on the sales team. They, incentives drive behavior, right? They are incented to go out, hunt, bring in the win, and then go back out and hunt some more. Right now, there are some things that we need to, if there's not some guardrails in place, there's some guardrails we need to put in place so that we can get the information that we need. Or if they're setting inappropriate expectations, it's not necessarily because they're doing it maliciously. Although I have had definitely my share of salespeople that have just thrown stuff over the fence so that they can line their pockets. Those are minor though. There's very, very few of those. It's really more of a education than anything, than something malicious, right? So remember that when you're dealing with sales teams, and remember, like you said, Madison, it's a team sport, right? And everybody needs to play well together to win. And the sales team is doing exactly what they've been hired to do.
Yes, and their success, you're dependent on their success as well, right? So we lose that somewhere sometimes, but we really are dependent upon them bringing in business. It is what actually keeps the lights on. So yeah, it's very important.
But if you're doing it right, you can establish some, if you're doing it right and you've established good relationships with your sales team and they trust you, which is where some of my greatest success came from, achieving that trusted advisor status with my sales team, that led to more business for them.
Absolutely.
So,
there's also like a tooling angle to this. In early stage firms, often they won't even be using a CRM yet. They'll be not really taking very many notes. Maybe it's on paper. So getting them into a system of record where they can hand over those notes, the more complex, the configuration of that account team is, the more important it is to have a mutual action plan where you actually line up who's responsible for what pieces of it, and even what parts of it are the client responsible for. If it's super complex, they're actually off-the-shelf tools. I'm not related to them. It's a different baton, but there's a baton that is literally onboarding software for implementing software. And then things like Gong and Chorus are fantastic for capturing key takeaways during those sales calls. So if they're able to pass over those kinds of instruments to you, it's low effort on their part while also giving you a lot of information.
But even just a shared Google Doc and saying, hey, here are my notes from my conversations with this customer, but there needs to be, a standard sales to CS handoff, as Kimberly mentions in chat. And also Kimberly mentions that what I was basically talking about, the customer success qualified lead, the CSQL, which my partner Aaron, who's sitting here listening, is probably tickled that I'm going to mention this, teaches as part of our outcome-based selling training program, which Aaron teaches. So there you go. OBS for the win. There you go. He's been waiting for that. And we're at the end of our time. And I was able to get a reference to OBS in here before the end of our conversation. God, we only answered 4 questions, man. Well, hey, great conversation. Lots of great stuff. We're at the end of our time for today, and I think it was a great conversation. But it's not what I think, it's what all of you think. So please let us know by posting your feedback on LinkedIn and tagging either myself, our guests, or Success Coaching. Once again, I want to thank my amazing panelists for spending time with us. Thank you, Anna and Madison and Max. Thanks for spending time with us today, sharing your ideas, thoughts, and insights and best practices. One final note, great CSMs know they don't have all the answers, but they know where to get them. That's why we created CSM Mastermind, to harness the knowledge and experience of the community to help improve everyone. We hope to see you again at our next event on March 15th, when we'll talk about determining the right value realization. Until then, make sure to make space for yourself and your mindset every single day. Have a great rest of your day, week, and month, everyone, until we see you again.